Welcome to another edition of the Backyard Professor podcast series, coming at you live from the Rocky Mountains here in lovely Idaho in a beautiful springtime in April. I'm Kerry Schertz, the Backyard Professor. I've been in quite a quandary. You know, when you want things to go smoothly and well, and they just simply won't cooperate with you and frustrate you and all that? Well, yes, I'm in that situation. I have misplaced my first edition of Nibley's Abraham in Egypt, and I haven't got a clue where it is. I've torn my library apart. I've even actually cleaned my library, hoping to find it under some stacks of papers and other materials that I'm doing some research on, and I can't find it at all. Now, I do have the second edition, and so instead of working from the first edition, I'm going to take something from the second edition as kind of a stalling technique so that I can give me another week before to find this. Now, it's not like I don't have enough materials to talk about, you know. I mean, I've got, 10,000 books. But actually, a dear friend of ours recently gave us several books from her father's old library that I personally had no use of, so I trotted on down to the used bookstore, and I traded them all in. I gave them 9 of them, and they were able to give me this book on Messianic prophecy, The Prediction of the Fulfillment of Redemption Through the Messiah by Charles A. Briggs. This is published by Hendrickson. It was, the first edition was way back, 1886. It was published by Charles Scribner's Sons. And the Hendrickson publishing was February 1988. It is a very interesting book on the way Messianic prophecy was seen in Brigham Young's day. And I think for that reason it's very valuable. And I do believe this is the same Briggs that is responsible for the huge Hebrew lexicon, the Brown-Briggs Driver lexicon. So I'm excited to have this book, in other words. However, I'm going to discuss the sacrifice of Isaac that Nibley analyzed so many years ago in the Improvement series, in the Improvement Era articles series, and this is in the Collected Works of Hugh Nibley, Volume 14, the one put out by Farms, which is a superb edition. I'm very, very happy with the artwork. My gosh, they included an enormous amount of the Egyptian materials that Hugh Nibley was talking about, and it really does bring it alive. They have done a superb edition of adding so much more into this. Now, this Sacrifice of Isaac is not in his original edition, but I am going to share this with you because it's all background. It really is, I promise. It is entirely relevant to the overall synthesis, the vision, the principles that Nibley was trying to teach us about the great patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their wives, Sarah, Rachel, Leah, so on and so forth. They were absolutely included. They're very interesting. He has a sacrifice on Sarah that perhaps if I don't find his first edition this next week, I'll produce yet another podcast. I may even do that later on today, too. So, well, on the sacrifice of Isaac, this is chapter 7 in the second edition of Abraham in Egypt, for those of you who do have it. For those of you who have the first edition, sorry it's not in there, but I'll get to it, I'll find it. Nibley, first of all, discussing this principle of types and shadows, he describes what the scholarship of history, and it doesn't matter what history, actually the religious history has found this to be most prominent, I'll put it that way, as opposed to the supposed secular history of the ancient world. But there is this idea of a repeating pattern, this idea of the ancients not necessarily recording history and living their lives the same way we do and understanding history the same way we do, because we now know that the ancients simply didn't think that way at all. There's no way they could have. There's no way they would have. What they did is they ritualized their lives on a basis of a mythological background. Now, this is not to say, because it is a mythological background, This is not to propose that the ancients made things up. Mythology is not in our modern sense, just a made up situation, or just simply a story with no basis of reality. No, Mircea Eliade, and to a lesser extent Joseph Campbell, both these two world-renowned mythologists, definitely demonstrated that mythology was the basis of fundamental reality, and the mixture of mythology with ritual, that is, repeated events, and we do find this even in the Abraham story, and it is something that Joseph Smith caught onto. Very interesting. Well, it was if I remember some of Nibley's writings, it was the Cambridge paternists of the 1930s that began to bring this situation out. They said, no, wait a minute, look. It is found in Herodotus, and it is found in some of the ancient materials as well, this idea of a repeating pattern of history. To us, it makes absolutely no sense. We say, oh, for Pete's sake, they do the same stupid things, they fall into the same problems, and it's always solved the same way. We can't understand that because we don't ritualize our lives the way the ancients did. This is kind of what Nibley is talking about when he's talking about the repeating patterns of history, and hence we have more or less dramatic plays going on. Very interesting how that is put together. And he says the exodus of the saints from Nauvoo. Here we find thousands of people suddenly moving west in the dead of winter of all times, cold, bitter, nasty times, amid scenes of some confusion. But it was within 3 days the entire host was organized into 12 main groups, one under each of the apostles, and companies of 50 and 100. Well, instantly, and quite unintentionally, the order of Israel in the wilderness and the sons of light in the Judean desert were faithfully duplicated. Now, a student of history 3,000 years from now might well reject the whole account as mythical, since it so obviously reduplicated an established pattern. However, there is another way to look at this. To someone who is aware of the interplay of pattern and accident in history, the stories of the sacrifice of Isaac and of Sarah, well, these are perfect companion pieces to the drama of Abraham on the altar. See, it's not only Abraham that was being sacrificed, and it's not only Isaac. This is not I know as it has been read through time, we have tended to assume or at least teach in this manner that it is a patriarchally dominated subject, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, Nibley has brought out the better balance of the husbands and their wives. All of them are going through